was a turning point in my son's life. It was, as I say, a request to be introduced to the holding of our ancestral archive. And it was hardly time for me to say, I have lost the key. So I had to quickly put something together and tell him a story. That is a very important thing because it is going to form the basis of a lot of things growing up. Self-actualization, identity, philosophies, worldviews, cultural realization, a lot of things, values in the society, everything was going to be learned from that stories as I learned them. And so I realized that if I didn't tell him the stories, what would he tell his children and their children? You see how it is? It was going to be very tricky. And so that was an awakening call. And I realized that if I, living and practicing theater arts, cannot remember stories to tell my children, what will the politicians, the bankers, and other people do? So there was a need to start reviving storytelling. And so Lododo Art was born because beyond the academy, other things need to happen. And so we started the storytelling project. This afternoon, I would like to say that storytelling, myth-making, they have so much in common. So many scholars, Sutherland, Parinda, Okpehu, all these scholars have propounded things that tell us the relationship between storytelling and myth-making, so they don't need to be discussed here. I will therefore look at storytelling, how it is manifesting in today's world from three different traditions. I will call them the tradition observed, tradition reframed, and tradition revised. Now, when we talk about tradition observed, I'm talking about the situation in which the stories are kept alive in other forms. For instance, there is a play written by J.C. de Graft called Anansi and the Gam Man. There's a clear folktale where Anansi deceives his family because the farm was ready for harvest and says his family brought a gam man, a statue, and then he woke up and felt threatened, wanted to fight the intruder, and he got stuck and was caught. That is a true representation of the folk tale, but presented in the form of contemporary village, which was a devised piece by Sarah Dorgbadzi and Ekua Ekuma. It was a recount of the Ghanaian folktale, and it was an experimentation of how the form, the storytelling form, can be brought alive on the contemporary stage without losing the essence. And so the story was kept true to its original form. Ifwa Sutherland also wrote plays called The Dwarf Brigade, in which Kweku Anansi ran away from his family to go and enjoy a whole cow by himself, and then he got visited by dwarfs and all that, and then he lost the battle. But beyond these expressions, there are also other art forms that have drawn on the folktales, giving them visual interpretation. So we have Anansi and the Pot of Beans by E.V. Esihene. And this is also a folk tale of Anansi visiting his family, his in-laws at a funeral, refusing to eat to make an impression, but stealing beans and getting caught. So this is a visual interpretation of that folk tale. There is also the painting, you will find it on the School of Performing Arts wall, one of the walls along the road, a painting by Bernard Akwe Jackson, which talks about the maiden with the hand of gold. It's a bit faint now, but if you look carefully, there's a maiden at the top with a yellow hand protruding there. Yeah. That is also a folk tale that we will talk about again in the next group of presentations, styles of use of the folk tales. There is also music inspired from the folk tale. Can we play Onyama Dring? Thank you. We can continue later. So yeah, this is a folk song, a folk tale about how the tortoise got onto the tree to attend a party to which he was invited to be ridiculed. Because you got the invitation, but how can the tortoise go up the tree? But then because there is need, there is inspiration for creative thinking. And he found his way there. So that is what the song is about. We will encounter it again somewhere at another point. And then we have also another painting. Abna is feeling very dizzy at this point. This is a painting of another folktale where a girl decides to help her carry her pot. The mudfish does that. And then what happens? She strikes. I think so much has been said about tradition observed. It is clear that people are using the folktale. Now, we have also another level of usage, which is they have been tweaked in one way or another to make other points beyond what the folktale in its original state was talking about. So we have, for instance, The Legend of Ekusika, which is a play written by Martin Owusu. Now, the folktale here has it that a young girl, Eku, was maimed when she was a child. And then she grew up, she lost her parents when she was a child. She was poor, lonely, and everything, miserable. And she was so ashamed of her amputated arm. That is what happened to her. That she kept her arm in a cloth. But that is not the focus of the tale. The tale is about how Akukon Triwa, the hen, decides to betray the king because instead of she, Akukon Triwa's child, the king had chosen to marry Ekusika. And so she spied on Eku in the bathroom and went to make noise to the kingmakers that, hey, the king has married a maimed person, and so he has to be dethroned. The thing is, culturally, it is a taboo for the stool or royalty to be associated with physical deformities or disabilities. Now, Martin Owusu's play emphasizes this point, whereas the folktale talks about how Akukon Triwa, the hen, sought to expose and embarrass Ekusika by plotting that all the king's wives would come and pound corn in public so that her hidden hand will be exposed. For fear of public ridicule, she decided to run away and drown herself. And before she did that, she called upon her ancestors to receive her soul. And then what happened? The ancestral spirits appeared and conjured a hand and restored her arm and decorated the new addition with gold trinkets. And she hit the hand again. When she went to pound the corn, she brought out the hand, and it was so dazzling beautiful that Akukon Triwa's plot found her in the same pot where she had wanted to put Eku. So the story itself was about gossiping. It was talking against people, telling on people. But Martin Owusu uses the story to question royalty's decision against, or the taboo that has been created about deformities in relation to royalty. He questions that. And it is a very interesting piece of work. Now, his work, he calls it the legend of Ekusika. Listened to this morning, or some of us listened to this morning concerning his work. His work was called The Legend of Ekusika Retold. And he was questioning why Eku needed to keep her hand hidden. And so he made his question that Eku was forced to keep her hand hidden, which is not what the folktale said, and it is not what Martin Owusu said. And he made the point that Eku's hand should be exposed without it being restored with gold or anything. That it is all right to be who she is. And it was a very strong point he makes. But then, it is not, of course, he's using it to make his point, and it is clear. But you will see is happening here. Other people have used folk tales in other forms. We can talk about Anansi in the Land of Idiots, which exposes the gullibility of rulers because of their greed to make wealth, appropriate wealth, and that in one of the communities where we're doing storytelling, usually our stories will end on the, and that is why we have Kokwanansi, or we have spiders and spider webs on corners of roofs. But in this case, the young girl said, and so Kokwanansi jumped and hid in the corner of the roof. And the king said, "You will remain there until the second coming of Jesus Christ." A new addition has come. But she's using it to represent her own experience and her own understanding of the life that she is living. And now, talking about the infusion of religion, or particularly Christianity, into the storytelling mode. In the charismatic evangelistic ministry, ever service, it is the practice that when the preacher is preaching, members of the congregation, like you're sitting there now, could raise their hand and say, "That day I was." It can be a song, it can be a form of endorsement, any form of contribution to the message. And when that is done, leading the Israelites to cross the Red Sea, then he would say, "On that day, I remember you were Moses' assistant," or give the person a character or a role in the message, and then the preaching continues. This clearly is a draw on the storytelling form as a way of propelling the gospel or the practice of church service. And now look at the image of Okuampofo's. This impression, donor and child, now is that of the Kuyaba doll. The relationship, the connections have been established, and we don't need to go into that. Only in the Volta region of Gaba, speaking to the native at Christianity, Abadol, which is in, can now go on to tradition. So in tradition, in this play, a young girl refuses the hand of any blue to marry a stranger with him. The stranger, but there are clear marries at every. The man swallowed. It is tools to be family can be traced to the girl in the folk. She gets married to Kofi Akun, and then in the end, she finds the intent of what connection about secrets say one was forced. Visual knows no, but then the sneaker types also drawing. So clearly, he hasn't. But then, oh, is what happens for me. I can see that this to tell the same media, we cannot finish very many different levels. And then the next thing you know, that recording is on social media. On the next level, you will find that the voice of the storyteller is projected over still picture, is muted, but the story. And the most interesting part of it for me is Anansi Chop Slap. This is a game in which the Anansi character moves along, he will be eluding you, and you keep chasing him until you are able to hit. When you hit an children, which is great, but in our traditional, it is person to person, but not play in developments. But logical. When one finishes first degree, I don't know how to do it. Child to sleep. Did the child? So that the developments are going on. Connectivity, which we are fast. I'm rounding up. To bring what we are losing, we have heard how to keep our the
So to open up for was wonderful. And Anoa, I'm glad you mentioned Anoa because the significance of her recent passing on the storytelling
is really you will think they will live for very hard to replace that voice in the political arena. It is a big blow to preserve the legacy.
Great.
University of British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. My question has to do with, I know that most of these stories we tell about Nancy, he mostly does, tell the dubiousness and the wicked things he does. To me, I think it's quite absurd if we as a nation has a dubious character such as Anansi who escaped. I do not think Anansi in a way that he, or as a more morally upright figure, a dubious own good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will respond with a song. Created the world. Spray him all the time. That when it's wrong, you have done this, you have done that. The story is told Betia and Tokweni. So you see, then it is all of us. We're doing storytelling in Oyejata. Somebody. And so
very much for as every man. A figure of every continues to reoccur 60 years. How can, from post-coloniality, since Ghana?
The story, because, so all the images. Some said, Anansi, and they created scenarios, narrative that we're making.
My name is Inspiring. I have a question. Could you please say a little bit more about simple good or bad, or what is the impact?
From the top of my head is a film I call, and the answer on all wisdom. So anybody who, obsessed with protecting that wisdom. Man standing by looked and said, Anans and wisdom. And the drugs explode inside. And it made her very intelligent. Lucy explodes. And do you see? So I can make about folktales, cartoons, and they are also a story from Simpson. Yeah? And as we are speaking, and I've called it intertextuality.
If you could turn to one of your slides and those connections.
Madonna and child. And the Madonna looks a certain way. And the child. But let's put color aside. There is certain quality, what is the word? Things like that. And the most about his use of the idea of Madonna and child as it is carried in Christian circles is Africans can also of the ebony is not all of us mythology a blonde hair. His own narration to represent the cross, the symbol of life. Equiaba sailed, and she is as feminine as any Madonna.
Thank you so much for the 4 o'clock.
Much Moenya for sharing. I believe you all got emails. The bus leaves from campus the buses leave from the drama studio, not here.